Welcome back to Torah on the Go. Whether you're walking your dog or on your Peloton or just taking a break from work, we're so glad that you've decided to take a few minutes out of your day to study Torah with me and my buddy Rabbi Feinstein.
Glad to be here.
And our two wonderful clergy members decided to join us, Cantor Jackie Raffi and Rabbi Yael Aronoff, for a conversation about the women of the book of Exodus. We are blessed here at VBS to have such capable women clergy, leaders in our community. And so we wanted to involve them into this episode so their voices are heard, so much like the voices of the powerful women of Exodus. There are 6 main women in Exodus, right? Can we all name them? The first 2?
Shifra and Puah.
Great. Shifra and Puah. This is a great episode of Jeopardy. Here we go. Yeah.
Yes.
Yocheved Miriam.
Yocheved and Miriam.
Bat Paro.
Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, and
Sipporah. My middle name.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, Moses' wife makes the list. Very nice. As we look at the role that all 6 of them play, it's an arc kind of surrounding the Exodus experience in Moses' life. What is their collective impact on the story of the Jewish people becoming a nation?
Well, I think that they're very strong-willed. And their impact, I mean, we can go through each one. Maybe we can talk about some of the women, but I want to talk about Miriam's role because I've always connected with Miriam. So even as a child, this woman is so intuitive and she's so clever. So she understands that Midrash teaches us that she gets her parents back together, causing the birth of Moshe, her younger brother. She's wise enough to understand that Pharaoh's ruling that all boys be thrown in the river doesn't preclude having more Jewish children because you could have a daughter. So she gets her parents back together, and she's wise enough to follow her baby brother as he's going down the Nile River and suggests to the daughter of Pharaoh, once she takes pity on Moshe, that her own mother, Moshe's own mother, actually be the nursemaid for the baby. So she is responsible for the birth of Moshe, our great Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, and she's responsible for his sustenance, and she's responsible for the reunion of his mother and him. So big roles from childhood. And then of course she has a huge role later in Exodus, but I just want to focus on her pivotal role at the very beginning of this story.
Right. And Rabbi Aronoff, when you think of the 6 of them, what strikes you as kind of an impactful contribution on the Jewish narrative?
Something I think that's interesting is that 4 of the 6 of them are not initially or probably not Jewish. I know there's some debate as to whether Shifra and Puah are Hebrew or Egyptian, but I know that in a previous podcast you've said that Rabbi Schulweis has said definitively Shifra and Puah are Egyptian, so we'll go with that. And then Sipporah is not Jewish, whether she becomes Jewish through marrying Moses later. And then of course Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh that we later call Bitya or Batya, she's not Jewish. And that it's already at a point in the story where us as a people, we've become this group and we're pitted against the Egyptians, and yet these 3 Egyptian women and this Midianite woman take on such a powerful role in the path towards our time as a free people, and allowing us to survive as the midwives did. And then fast forward to Sipporah, who not only as a Midianite woman does she marry the leader of the Jewish people, but she also, there's the moment that I really love that there's this odd moment when Moses gets the call to return to Egypt and free the people, and Moses and Sipporah and their kids are journeying back to Egypt, and there's some sort of divine attack on Moses, and Sipporah circumcises their son, bringing him into the covenant of the Jewish people. And so there's a commitment to the Jewish people from these 4 women that are not initially Jewish or probably not Jewish. And I find that really, they're more than allies, they're advocates, and they become a part of our story and a part of our people in that way.
To help prepare for this episode, I listened to our previous episode about Shifra and Puah as well. Who better to learn from than us? And what's funny is we talked about their civil disobedience, but actually when I think about all 6 of these women, they were all civilly disobedient.
Right.
None of these women abide by the law that is handed to them by Pharaoh.
Right.
They all make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, Harold Bloom, the great University of Chicago literary critic, once made the radical suggestion that the JE document, which is the principal narrative of the Torah, was written by a woman.
Right.
Because the position, first of all, the fact that a patriarchal society would even mention women is already a departure from the norm. And more than that in this particular narrative, and we'll see in Genesis as well, but in this particular narrative, the women are all on the side of life, and the men are all on the side of death. It's Pharaoh who promulgates the policy of genocide. It's Shifra and Puah, Yocheved and Miriam who resist, and Batya, his own daughter, who fishes the kid out, the redeemer, fishes the redeemer out of the Nile. And then, as you said, in a later moment in the narrative, when Moses is threatened, she's the one who pushes back death and brings life back to the family. The other quality that they have is that they see things that nobody else can see. We also talked about this a little bit. We are conditioned by the culture we live in to see what we're supposed to see and not see what we're not supposed to see. But there are certain remarkable individuals in every generation who can see past the cultural screens, right? In our own experience, our own historical experience in the American South, and frankly in the American North, segregation was the rule, and everyone thought it was normal, until a woman named Rosa Parks said, "I'm not getting up from the bus." And suddenly we saw what we were doing to African Americans. Similarly, a generation later or so, it was normal for women to have a subjugated secondary role in society, and Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan all just open our eyes and see what we've done to half of the human population. Shifra and Puah can see that the children they're delivering are not enemies, aliens, pollutants, cancer on the body politic. They see them as children. Yocheved, the mother, says the Torah explicitly, Vayar ki tovhu. Kitov doesn't mean that he's a beautiful kid, Gerber box baby kid. No. Kitov means he has a resonance of cosmic power. And the daughter of Pharaoh, she's the most radical one. The woman who is closest to the policy of genocide, fishes the kid out of the Nile, and the Torah says she sees a crying baby. She doesn't see alien, enemy, other, pollutant, threat. She sees a baby and her heart is moved. So they all have this quality of eyes, of vision, that can see past the evil culture that they are raised in, the closed culture, the narrow, Mitzrayim means narrowness, the narrowness of the culture, to stand with life, to stand with goodness.
I also thought that if you think about all six, they represent the kind of complete social network of Shifra and Puah are servants that work in Egypt that are supposed to execute Pharaoh's plans. They don't. Yocheved and Miriam are slaves that actually resist. They don't fit into that social construct at all. And then Pharaoh's daughter and Sipporah are both royal women. Right. Mm-hmm. Right? So they're both daughters of men who are perceived to be, high society, whether it be Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, or whether it be the Kohen Gadol of Midian, right? And so all of them, the portrait of these six women it forms this beautiful portrait of life in society, and all of them, like you said, fight for the goodness of life, fight for what's right in the world. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off or anything.
No, I was just going to say on the point of seeing, there's this beautiful collection of contemporary women's midrash called Dir Shuni, and there's a midrash about Shifra and Puah that's written, and it plays on when Shifra and Puah make this decision, it's because they feared God, and the word for fear is yirah, and so the woman who wrote this midrash plays with the word yirah and the word for seeing, and this interplay between, did they fear God? Did they see something godly in these women and these babies? What did they fear? What did they see? And the play between those two words.
So the thread of fearing and seeing, right, makes it bridges between Genesis and Exodus. The idea that they are a reflection of all these different subsets of society, they come from different places, is very much a contrast with Genesis, because in Genesis, all of the women are basically presented in the same light. They're all the husbands of patriarchs. who are part of the family, the same family story, the same family dynamic.
But they're all related too.
They're all related,
You know,
right.
they're all cousins with each other. You
Right.
know?
So, we all come from the same place in Genesis. Literally, we all come from the same location, and we come from the same family in Genesis. Here, this is a far-reaching narrative where we have even royal women from two different areas of the world at some point in Egypt and Midian. How are we supposed to make sense? Do we see it as an evolution in women's roles? Do we see it as a totally different narrative in women's roles? Because, like as you said, to say that J and E are the same is even radical. To say that Genesis and Exodus is written similarly would be radical as well, considering that the two books feel so different at times.
I definitely see it as an evolution. I see that in Genesis, life happens to a lot of the women. So, Sarah is infertile, and then in her old age, God brings her a child. Rebecca is chosen by the servant Eliezer. Things happen to them, but the women of Exodus take their destiny into their own hands. They pursue civil disobedience, to your point. I want to talk about Shifra and Puah, one more point about them, because I love them. We're spending a few minutes on them. One thing that I'm going to quote Tikva Freimer-Kensky, who wrote a beautiful commentary on Torah, who pointed out that Pharaoh saw the narrative of the Jewish people through the lens of the boys, and the men are the ones that will carry forth the tradition. That's why he had all boys. He wanted to kill all the boys. But what about the women? But it's actually the women that save the future of the Jewish people. They actually saved. So he's seeing the men, which he's probably thinking about them as like army rising up to fight against the Egyptians. Even the women are the ones who bear the children, but we see that the women are actually the ones who promulgate the Jewish people. So again, that has to do with seeing, Shifra and Puah seeing beyond Pharaoh's narrow-mindedness, and it also has to do with these women, whether Egyptian or Hebrew or Israelites, taking their destiny into their own hands, as opposed to what I see as the women of Genesis allowing fate to happen to them. Leah, she's is forced into a very sad situation.
Right. No, they definitely have a greater sense of agency.
Mm-hmm. I want to note a thread that I see between the women or one woman in Genesis, one woman in Exodus, from another book that I love called Women's Divination in Biblical Literature, because we have Rebecca, who has a moment of communicating with God when she's pregnant. So there's this seeking out and communicating with God. And then we have Miriam, who's named a prophetess, who has her connection to communicate with God. So they're both considered, they both have prophetic ability in communicating with God. And so they might communicate differently, and they might grapple with life differently, but there's a thread of relationship with God between these women, that they have this they have this connection that I see with Rebecca and Miriam specifically, because they're both sort of seen as Miriam is named a prophetess, and Rebecca has this prophetic ability.
So just note the evolution one more time. We don't think of Exodus normally as a family book,
right,
as a book about family, but I would argue there's an evolution of motherhood in the sense that every mother in Genesis is forced to choose between one child who's going to be great and one child who's going to be dreck. Right? We have to choose between one child who's going to get the covenant. Every mother determines the path of the covenant. That's Women of Genesis, written by Tammy Schneider. Every woman is actually the one who decides the covenant, not the fathers in Genesis. But it's always a binary choice, where one kid is going to get it, one kid's going to be left out in the cold. And then suddenly we are introduced to, I think the most impactful woman in Jewish history, Yocheved, all right, who has 3 children and says, you're all going to be leaders of the Jewish people. You're all going to be impactful. You're all going to be you're all going to be in your own lane, but you're all going to be great. And it's the first group of siblings that actually get along to that sense. They're all leaders in their own right, and the Torah celebrates each one of them.
You love to know what they served at their Shabbos dinner.
For sure.
It's kind of like Einstein's mother, what he gave.
Right.
No, the fact that there's women at all in the story is still radical, because it's a patriarchal narrative, and women don't count in the patriarchal narrative. They're invisible. And all of a sudden, this narrative includes these women and gives them this role. They get to choose who carries the covenant. And that's a remarkable idea. They manipulate history. And sometimes it's a gross manipulation, like Rebecca, for example, manipulating history. And you watch, and there's an evolution, the wonderful evolution of Leah, for example. So the first 3 kids, she's the unwanted wife, which is a terrible position to be put in, right? So the first kid is Reuven, which means, oh, he'll see me now and love me. Like Nebuch, I'm sorry. And then the second one is Shimon, he'll hear me, God will hear my cry. And the third one is Levi, which is he'll come and accompany me. It's wonderful because then she gets to the fourth one. And the fourth one, of course, now she has beat the family total because Sarah had 1 kid and Rebecca had 2 kids and Leah's now had 3. The fourth one is Yehuda, which means I give thanks to God. Like, I don't need him anymore. She comes into her own. And he is, of course, that's the chosen one.
Right.
He becomes the chosen one, and his adversary is going to be Yosef, who is the chosen one of Rachel, the other life, the favored wife. They're the ones who manipulate the history of the story. And the fact that the story includes them is remarkable. I mean, the irony is, I don't want to get too gross about this, but the irony is that the covenant is sealed on the male organ of reproduction, but it's the female who decides which kid is going to carry the covenant forward. Right? That's a remarkable thing. That's a remarkable story. And the idea then that family is the place in which covenant is promulgated, and mothers have a decisive role in determining who's going to carry forward this covenant.
On the topic of names and how incredible it is that women are included at all, I was sort of noticing in Exodus, Shifra and Puah are named immediately, but then Yocheved and Miriam are not. And so I was curious to see, where are they named? So Yocheved isn't named until we get to a lineage.
The begats.
Right. And again, speaking to how she is this woman who's continuing the line. And then Miriam isn't named until the crossing of the sea, and it says Miriam, sister of Aaron, and she takes her timbrel, her hand drum, what have you, and leads the women in dance and song. And so it's interesting, these moments of this Amram took a wife and
a man from the house.
Oh, right. Actually, he was. Yeah, you're right. He's not named either. That's interesting.
And that's what's funny, because it plays off the name of Levi.
Right.
That they accompany. The may he accompany me. We see that when the husband of Levi and a woman of Levi accompany one another, right? And then we're to assume what they were accompanying each other to do, because the next sentence is that there was a baby that was born, right? So it cuts the chase very quickly. But thank goodness, because that baby then starts the family. That baby is Moses. We don't find out till later that they've had other children, right?
The great thing, though, is that in that narrative, Shifra and Puah are named before the king of Egypt is named. He's just called Melech Mitzrayim. He's not even called Pharaoh there, I don't think. It's Melech Mitzrayim. Later we find out it's Ramses or whatever it is. He is anonymous. And of course, in the Bible's calculation, having a name is your place in the world, right? What's the great Jewish curse is Yimach Shemo. Right. You should erase the name, as we do to Haman on Purim. These two, servant women, basically, midwives, and they're women, and they have a name before the most powerful king in the world is named in the narrative. And of course, at the end of the narrative, what's their reward? Because they saved Israelite babies, they get batim. Right. Batim doesn't mean that they get new kitchens. What it means is they have a dynasty.
In Hebrew, it literally means houses.
Houses, yeah, but houses, this means dynasty, right, which means they're still in the world.
Right.
They're still in the world. You just have to go and find them and name them again.
Right. And what's interesting to me is, if you were to read the whole Hebrew Bible, which of course we encourage people not to read ahead, but if you...
go ahead. It's Leviticus. Right. It ain't going to help you very much.
If you were to read the whole Hebrew Bible, the next set of women that we meet is the daughters of Shlophachad, who come to Moses and say, this is unjust, fix it. Yeah. And God says, fix it. What are you doing? Fix it. Yeah, so Moses has to fix that situation for them. Women seem to come in the Torah again and again to say, there's a problem here in the world that you can't see, that lies in front of us.
Right.
Fix it.
Right.
And so they end up being a signpost, not only to the Jewish tradition, but to society in general in the book of Exodus, to say that we have to rely on women to help us constantly, move in the right direction.
Because the woman is outside the patriarchal culture. She can see what men have become accustomed to and therefore can't see. Right? And who's the next one? We play this game. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
who's the next woman in the story?
Rachav.
Rachav.
Right.
Rachav, the aptly named Rachav, who is a woman of the wall with a red string outside of her house.
Right.
And she's the one who comes and tells the spies and tells Joshua, remember, the Israelite people arrive in Canaan 38 years before this, and they don't want to go in because they're afraid of the giants that live in the land. And Rahab's the one who tells them, "Are you kidding? We're terrified of you people. We feel small compared to you." She's the one who sees this geopolitical circumstance like no one else sees it.
And then move forward again and again and again.
Deborah would be
Women play this role for the Jewish
Deborah
people.
and Yael.
Deborah and Yael.
Yes, the headache story.
The headache story. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah. If she gives you a glass of milk, don't drink it.
That's right. Also, something revolutionary. Rabbi Feinstein was talking about this revolutionary presence of women. I'd also go beyond it to say that the Torah also has a revolutionary role for women. So in Genesis, women are wives and mothers, and I'm sure in the society, that was the patriarchal view, wives and mothers. But what I love about Miriam is that, and we could say the same about Shifra Pua, Miriam is never named as a wife or a mother. Her role is entirely distinct. It's a prophetess. She's a leader. She's a singer. She's a dancer. She's a song leader. And I love that the Torah is expansive about the role of women as well, and doesn't pigeonhole them.
What's funny is in the book of, I don't know that it's funny, in the book of Genesis, God tells Abraham, Shema b'kolah, listen to Sarah's voice. Right. I don't know that Abraham does such a good job listening, but he is instructed to do so. Isaac stands by Rebecca as she calls out to God, like you talked about, and lidrosh, that's the first time that we have the word to explain God's message. And Jacob certainly just throws up his hands over and over again. 4 women, 12 kids. You have to feel sorry for them.
Don't try this at home.
That's right. You have that's a whole lot of family. Joseph, we really don't ever get to know his wife, right? The Egyptian wife, the daughter of Potiphar, whatever. However you understand his wife,
right.
This Egyptian woman. And then in Exodus, Osnat, the daughter of Potiphar.
Right? Yeah. The other one, her mother is a different story.
Different story. And then we get to Exodus. God never has to tell people to listen to Yocheved, Miriam, Zipporah. It never has to be explained. So perhaps there's been a little bit of growth on behalf of the men in the story of the Torah as well, or perhaps. At our lowest points, I think it's easy to argue through history as well. At our lowest points in Jewish tradition, in the Jewish narrative, men and women need each other differently, need to rely on each other differently, need to seek each other's judgment differently, and that's where Jewish women have always emerged through those stories to say, I'll help pull you out, and we've needed Jewish women at the outset of the state of Israel. Stories from inside the Shoah, stories from the emergence of Zionism, the Zionist ideas now by Gil Troy. That there were so many female Zionists from the outset that contributed to that conversation. It's more difficult when things are going well for us. for a Rabbi Nina Bieber to step forward and say, I'd also like to go to JTS.
Yeah, this is the 40th anniversary of the ordination of women, and Nina was the first woman accepted into the rabbinical school at JTS, and she suffered for it because it wasn't easy. It's a nice thing to reconstruct history and locate those women's voices. I think it's very important. But I also think we have to confess that this patriarchy was pretty oppressive.
Right.
And that there are moments in the Torah that just make you grimace. The Sota ritual, for example, that just makes you grimace at how the culture treated women, thought about women. Again, we live in a place where we can see that now. Right. For most of Jewish history, we couldn't even see it. And that's because women of extraordinary vision opened our eyes and said, here I am. Pay attention, listen to me, notice where I am in the culture, and notice the gifts that I'm ready to bring to the community. And that's why we're honored to have our colleagues here with us today.
Well, I hope that everybody enjoyed this episode. This is an experimental episode, not only in terms of environment in my office, rather than at Colin Plume's office, and we're forever eternally grateful to Colin for opening up his office to us all the time. But involving more voices from the clergy in this episode, and so we hope that you enjoy it. If you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, please send it to the website. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we hope you enjoy studying the book of Exodus with us.